Hello and welcome to another interview. In this presentation, it's actually an interview between myself and Richard Vobes. In this discussion, we talk about the paperwork that comes with the summons which is issued by the local council. You should be aware that the local council is not allowed to take on a role of a court or perform any of its functions. This is only one problem with the paperwork they provide. This interview was done about a year ago, and I've done a similar presentation on it on my show previously, but it may help to go over these issues and point out the many flaws. Now, if you are challenging council tax, one of the issues that I would bring up, well, several of the issues I would bring up regarding their paperwork are covered in this presentation. As stated earlier, I did present this previously and maybe had some additional points in that document or this document. But in any event, be sure to share this with anyone that you feel would be it would benefit. And I look forward to presenting additional information as I have time to develop it. There will be 2 additional videos coming out shortly. I would ask that everyone subscribe to my channel, like and subscribe. Tell your friends. The more people I can get on this channel, the more people I can help. With that said, I will now turn it over to the actual interview. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another of my interviews, another of our investigations with Stan McDonald. Hello, Stan.
Hello, Richard. It's good to be here.
It's good to be back again. These videos are proving very popular. People are finding them fascinating, interesting and helpful. Today we are looking at the dreaded council tax. And when we say we're looking at it, we're looking at why, I suppose, why we should pay it or why we shouldn't pay it, more to the point, and how you avoid paying it. Is that right? Because, I mean, there's a sense in me that thinks morally we would like to contribute to our towns so that they were doing good things. But if they're not doing good things with our money, then maybe we should have the choice to withhold our money until they do the things we actually want them to do rather than those things that we don't want them to do.
Correct, yes. And we talked about this in a different presentation where, you have a right. If you're a customer, right, we're going to just use it as a customer service outfit. Yeah. They're a service corporation, and they're providing some services, supposedly. And yeah. It obviously isn't road maintenance.
No, not around here. Have you got potholes up where you are?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Now, yeah, so one of the things we can do to touch on that basis, and I would suggest everybody does this. There's 231 boroughs or something like that in England?
Yeah, something like that.
So if the people turn around, and this is going to help your case, find out roads that you travel, write down the street name and the location roughly of the pothole, and notify the municipality. This gets back into what we talked about, Les. And the city has to, once you notify them, right, of these potholes and where they are, they can't get out of it because a lot of people are putting in claims to the local council for car repairs, for broken springs, faulty tires, ball joints, this kind of crap. But the city can say, well, we didn't know about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to close the door. We're going to notify them of the holes and the problems, like it's freaking blatantly obvious.
Yes.
And tell them to go fix it. Now, in 30 days, if they don't fix it, if you have damage to your car, I don't say make up your own damage. I'm not saying go do something stupid. You can then say, well, you knew about it because we told you.
Yes.
If enough people did that, the municipality would have to turn around and start fixing these roads.
I know that they spray them with a white circle and say, well, we've highlighted where they are. You've got to steer your vehicle to avoid them. Now, that might be all right for one pothole in 100, but when there's 15 potholes in the same half-meter stretch,
you can't
that's
do
a
much,
bit. You can't do much about it.
Yeah.
Where are you going to steer the vehicle other than into the oncoming traffic or a cyclist or a pedestrian, which is obviously not something you would do.
Right. The thing is, the municipalities are obligated to try and repair the roads, either directly or subcontracted out.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we're paying for. That's why we're paying. Forced to pay.
Right. Well, yeah. The other thing you can do too is you can, if you have a problem with the municipality, I would check into and find out where they're spending money. I mean, I did one research project and I found out that they were divesting in, as I said earlier, companies that dealt with the armament and acts of war.
Right.
Many of them were U.S. contractors to, that made aircraft parts, military aircraft, and stuff like that. And so if these people or this company is investing, then why aren't you getting a share of that return on investment?
Yeah,
and I
that's
found
true.
other ones. Yeah, I found other ones involved in bread and breakfast expenses, hotel expenses. How is that related to the municipality? So if everybody does this and gathers this information from a credible source, not just Bob told me down at the bus stop on my way to work yesterday, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So find the actual evidence and keep it.
Yes.
Now, to the viewers that don't know, I've set up a Telegram group. You can look for it. It's called Denied Truth. And there's one for the UK, there's one for USA, and there's one for Canada.
Denied Truth, did you say?
Yeah. And if the people will post the information there or send it to me, and Richard has my email address below the link, I will turn around and gather this because we could use this to build a case.
Mm.
Right? So I'm going to be busy now after mentioning that, but that's okay.
150,000 subscribers. If you could all do it on the same day, I just want to see Stan's face as his email goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes through if people are in other jurisdictions and they have road problems. Check the Highway Act or Highway Traffic Act or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And in Canada, I know at least in Ontario, the provincial government handed it back to the local municipalities, who there again don't maintain the road. And you can submit a bill if your vehicle is damaged, and they're going to say, well, where was it damaged? Well, that's kind of a dumb question because your vehicle, unless you hit a major pothole, it gets damaged over time. Repeated bang, bang, bang. Eventually, material stress cracks and away it goes. And so, where did it happen? Well, how about here, there, and everywhere? Driving for the last year and a half over all these stupid potholes. Now, if you fall into a great big pothole, well, that's different, right? And that can screw up your front end alignment. So if you let go of your steering wheel, your car goes off to the left or right. Well, that's a front end alignment problem due to hitting stuff. So unless you're an idiot and drove over the curbs, it's probably from the road. So we do have a recourse, but so I don't advise anybody to just stop paying council tax. What I would suggest is send them a letter, ask for clarification, relative to potholes, for example, or the expenditures of money. If you do the research and say, well, hey, I found out you guys are invested in Lockheed Martin. What are you guys doing? Right, Lockheed Martin's an aircraft company that makes military aircraft.
Yeah.
Or BlackRock is another one.
Do we all get a free flight, a go in these military aircraft? Can we have a go at firing the missiles, seeing as we've paid for it?
Yeah, no, not likely.
No.
But so what you do is you never outright stop paying. What you do is you have a right, and everybody has this right. If you deal with a company and these corporations, okay, they're a service company. They're no different than the Esso station, BP, Petroleum, McDonald's, whatever. They're a service corporation, so they have to abide by certain rules. And there's a thing called GAAP, General Accepted Accounting Practices. Okay, and we're going to get into that later when we deal with mortgages. That's another topic for another day. But they're subject to certain rules. And there's a doctrine, which is sort of like a legal maxim, which we've covered in an earlier presentation, called the Clearfield Doctrine. And the Clearfield Doctrine, which I'll send Richard a link to it, what it does is it says that if you're engaged in species of money and you operate as a business, more or less, then you assume the same roles and responsibilities as any other business. Well, there's many companies, aka city councils, that have a DUNS number. And a DUNS number, which is Dun and Bradstreet number, designates that you're for-profit business. So if you go look that up, look up the DUNS number, or if you have to, you can request it. which they may or may not want to provide to you after this video. But anyway, you can use that too and use the Clearfield Doctrine. Now, for those that don't know, okay,
I just thought I'd go to Dun and Bradstreet.
Yep. And depending on where you are, if you're in Canada or the States, you'll have a different version of it. But there it is, .uk. There you go. And yep. Where you look, yep. Sometimes this can be a little squirrely to work with. It doesn't always cooperate the way we want it to. But if you work through it, you can figure it out. What I intend to do is actually make up a list.
Okay, didn't find that one. Let's search something else.
Yeah, and sometimes they're listed differently. And they're not all. Not everybody has a DUNS number,
right?
Or if some do, some don't. But you can, if you want to screw them up, just ask them if they operate under the general accepted accounting practices, and if they do, that means they're a business, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's another one argument. For those that didn't do it, I would suggest that you go through the previous presentation that we did that dealt with primary legislation, because there's some more arguments there that can be used. And as I say, I intend to eventually, when I get around to it, make up a list of all these boroughs and have all these DUNS numbers listed. For the ones I can, the ones I can find.
What can you find?
If somebody's in the borough, in a certain borough, and they have a DUNS number that they already dug up, or if they don't mind doing it for us, there's 231 I have to go try and find. If you guys want
that would be great.
Help us.
Send it to Stan. That would be really helpful. I know there'd be lots of people who would, who take the information and they find it extremely valuable and would like to give back, and that would be a terrific service. So, thank you very much if you do.
Yeah, and you'll find out, even if you look on the Security Exchange Commission, sec.gov, if Richard pulled that up, you can look in there, and you're going to find out something real interesting. sec.gov is the Security Exchange Commission.
SCC.
SEC. I think that's what it is. Anyway, the Security Exchange Commission, and you'll find out in there, sec.gov. You'll find in there that all these provinces and many countries are actually listed on the Security Exchange Commission. And we can do a separate thing on that if we have to. So if you look in there, you're going to find out they're listed as a government. Oh, there you go.
There we go.
And you can do a search through there, and you can find out that companies are in fact listed there as companies, more or less.
Right.
And so if they're engaged in securities, well, every country in the world is engaged in a security exchange. Even money that we use, currency that we use, is a security. Yes. So if we look into that, we can go down that rabbit hole at some point. But if we want to just, those are arguments you can use. But now if we look at the current legislation, okay, we're not talking primary, we're talking current legislation. Okay? We can look up Section 51 of the Magistrates Court Act, 1980.
So here we go. Let's get that big up. So, what am I looking for?
You're looking for the Magistrates Court Act, 1980. And the reason I have Richard do this, some people say, well, you're wasting time because you're getting Richard to look this up. I'm doing this for a reason, so that nobody can say that we created some document and how do we find it? We're showing you exactly how to look this stuff up. So you guys can do the same thing we're doing, and it's because I've had people ask me, well, how do you find all these laws? How do you find all these rules?
Where am I? What am I doing wrong here?
Apparently you're not spelling it right. Just type in 1980 in the year and it should come up. Or you may have to Google search it. Because as we're showing you here, not always just punch in 1980 and we'll see what it comes up.
Yeah.
Get rid of that.
Okay,
get rid of that text. Yeah, and just see what comes up. Watch what happens here, guys.
Oh, here we go.
Now we're looking for Magistrates Court Act. Magistrates Courts Act, actually. Courts being plural.
Yeah. Maybe if I put 1980 in courts, it will come up. Here we go. So you can find it. I was spelling it completely wrong. I was putting Majesty as opposed to Magistrates. Oh, the nerves. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, here we are.
Okay, look under Part 2.
Part 2. Here we go.
And
Civil
yeah,
jurisdiction and procedure.
Yeah, you're looking for Section 50. What is it? 51.
Which is here.
Yep. So we just click on that.
And what we get is...
This is where we start to find the laws, guys, or the statutes.
Yeah.
Call it whatever you like. But if you scroll part ways down through there, you'll find out all the stuff we're going to tell you.
Right.
Issue of summons on complaint. That's what we're looking for.
Issue of summons on complaint.
Yep. So we're in the right section.
Previous provision. Next provision, is it?
That's 52. Well, you're supposed to.
Okay, I've gone. Let's go back
You got
here.
one.
So I've got criminal procedure rules.
Issuing
Rules,
some.
criminal procedure amendment. Nothing to
Yeah,
do.
it should scroll. It should be underneath all that. Usually the amendments are on the top. Sometimes they're on the bottom. Hey, oh, hang on. What's this thing right there? Issuing. What does it say there?
I can't see where you're.
Issuing a summons on complaint. What does it say?
Issuing a summons on complaint. It says, where a complaint relating to a person is made to a justice of the peace, the justice of the peace may issue a summons to the person requiring him to appear before a magistrate's court to answer the complaint.
Right. So what did that say? That said, basically, it's supposed to go to a justice of the peace, right?
Yeah.
But what we find is when the council tax issues the order, what they do is they submit a list electronically to the magistrate's court. So it's never reviewed by the justice of the peace. There's your first flaw, because it's done in bulk. So they're already violating the Magistrates Court Act, the very court that you've got to deal with.
Right. And so, I mean, if they violate these things, that makes it null and void. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so they're already doing that.
Yeah, that's the first act, and we already found the flaw.
Gosh.
Now, yeah, that was pretty easy, wasn't it?
Right. Well, thanks for watching. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time.
No. So then the next problem is that if we go through the next part, you have a right to do, and people have asked, well, how do you do this? You have a right to request data from the, basically through the Freedom of Information. It's called the Data Protection Act.
Right.
Okay? Now, this Data Protection Act, I'm going to overlap it into the ULEZ, basically says that the data protection, they're supposed to verify everything that they do is with the correct person and with the proper authority. Well, when you get into the ULEZ and these cameras, and they send a request over and they get the information back to the council, you haven't committed a crime, so they're violating the Data Protection Act.
I see. Yes.
Right. But you, because you're a subject, you have a right to request the information I talked about earlier from the council, because you're the subject. And so when you make your requests under a Freedom of Information request, FOIA request, you send it to the FOIA, you tell them right on the document, FOIA request, put it on the envelope, because they have certain people within that office that deal with that. Right? They deal with FOIA requests.
Yeah.
So you have a right to request information. So again, you're not refusing to pay, you're asking for clarification.
Yes. I mean, have you paid anything at this point? You're just saying you're making a statement, are you, to say I'm not refusing to pay. I'm just asking this question in advance.
Right. Now you have a right. Everybody has a right when you deal with any company. If you think there's an error in your bill, aka council tax bill, you have a right to go to them and say, I think there's a billing error dispute.
Right.
And you can write that on your letter as a heading.
Billing error dispute.
Yeah, notice. Because remember, letters can be heaved out. So billing error dispute notice. And if you find that you think the city's doing something wrong or municipality's doing something wrong, especially if you've done the research and you find out they're engaged in arms or, other illegal, what's all this bread and breakfast, 30 expenses in 2 months.
Yeah.
Anything like that, and subject to the Highway Act, they're supposed to repair the roads, and here's all these repairs that you were noted of over a month ago, and
Right.
still hasn't been repaired. So where is my money going? So now you're just asking a question, right? And you're not refusing. Okay? But if you don't ask a question, like if you ask stupid questions and they're not relative to what you're trying to accomplish, and you're asking for information, that's a national secret or private information for their personal life, stuff like this, they have a right to blank it out. So
Yes.
when you make your request, make sure your request is valid and deals with the exact section of the law or whatever you're dealing with. And it comes under the Data Subject Access Request, which is known as DSAR, Section 173, Sub 3. So 173, bracket 3, close bracket. And it tells you right in there how they can blank stuff out. Okay?
Yeah.
And then if you go to the council tax, and we won't pull this up because it takes forever, but if you go to the council tax paperwork, and there's an enforcement section, right? And if you go through the enforcement section, you're going to find out that legislation, that statute, gets its authority from the other one. So one gets its authority from back and forth. So there's a conflict, right? How can a legislation get its authority from another legislation, and that one get it from the first one?
Yeah.
Well, who gave the thing master authority in the first place?
Right. Otherwise, it's just a circular argument.
Right. And then if you want to look into, and I don't want to keep everybody all day long, but you can look in the Senior Courts Act as another issue. Okay? And so we'll get into that at a different point if that happens, because a lot of people right now are into and dealing with council tax, and probably many of them are already at the summons stage.
Yes.
So what I'm going to cover now, I've given you a little bit of homework to do. What I'm going to cover now is the next portion of dealing with their actual letter. And I'm basing this on a letter from Lancaster City Council. If you live in a different area, your letter is going to be different, right? One thing, when they give a summons, they issue the summons, but they give you this letter and says that the person is named on the attached summons. What? So they didn't even address the letter to you. And it says on the top of this document, HM Courts and Tribunal Services. So that would lead you to believe that this thing was issued by the court.
Yes.
But we already established under the first rule that it has to be reviewed by the Justice of the Peace.
Right,
So here's the question. You can ask a question to the City Council. What Justice of the Peace reviewed your document to establish the fact that I, in fact, owe this alleged debt? They can't answer it because it's submitted in bulk.
Right.
So therefore, they're now going to have to admit either somebody did this and somebody did review it, which is highly unlikely, or they're going to have to say it was submitted in bulk, which means now you've got them on the hook because they violated the Magistrates Court Act.
What's to stop them from taking that question and going, right, okay, take that down to the court and get a magistrate to look at it and review it and then say, okay, we have now done that?
We're going to ask some more questions. So if they want to put somebody on the hook, let them. I don't care. That's great. What facts did you use to determine that I owe council tax and that my billing error dispute issues raised are not valid?
So these would be the potholes, the whatever it is,
Yeah.
the swimming pool that you promised hasn't been built, and all these various things. The bins haven't been taken because you've all been on strike, or whatever it is.
Or the fact, and another question: how is what's the legality behind this the ULEZ cameras?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the cost. Who authorized this? And where was the vote done by the public? Because most things that are done, if they're your public servant and they want to do something, they should be notifying the public. This is what we intend to do.
Yes.
Now, in the case of I can tell you in Ontario, many jurisdictions don't even publish their supposed amend changes. And if you find a bylaw that's all been signed off on the same day, that bylaw is illegal. You guys have that same right. If they're your public servants, how can they just say, we're going to implement this and you have no choice?
Quite.
Where's the people's vote, right?
Yeah.
Because as we
or a
went back,
consultation, a public consultation where people can go and meet up at a village hall and discuss it and all of that.
right, exactly. And the thing is, we talked about before in the other primary legislation video that we did, it says it's supposed to be subjects, right? We're the subjects of the Queen. Anything that's detrimental to our well-being. Well, when people push in this ULEZ or they push in,
15-minute cameras in cities and stuff.
and certain mandates that have happened in the past, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Where was that to benefit the public? Yeah. Where was that benefiting the public? It didn't benefit anybody. In fact, in my opinion, that act, I'll just leave it at that, was done to implement this financial reset, where they're all going to CBDC, which is central bank digital currency. And I have a separate presentation on that as well. But back to our letter, it says here, HM Courts and Tribunal Services notice. So they're giving us a notice, we give them a notice, no problem.
Yeah.
And it says, okay, to the persons named on the attached summons. Well, that's no good, because it's not addressed to anybody.
Right.
Right? It's addressed to nobody. Well, what we want to do when we deal with these people is we want to find somebody down there. We need a name.
Yes.
Because if you want to challenge something, can I take a corporation to court? Well, yeah, but ultimately somebody's responsible.
Yes.
Right? So who authorized this notice? It's not signed. The summons isn't signed. The summons doesn't have a seal on it from the court. So it's all blank, right? And then it says from Lancaster Magistrates Court, and it gives a telephone number and an email. And it says Lancaster City Council, it gives their phone number. And then it says council tax appropriation liability order to be granted against you. Oh, okay, so that means then somebody has reviewed the facts of the case, determined that you're legally and liable for the council tax. Yet in a court of law, normally, if I want to put a claim against you, we've covered this, Richard, I have to send it to you first.
Yes.
And show and prove my liability. But this thing says right here, application for liability order to be granted against you. Okay, that makes sense. They're coming after me for council tax. But where did they prove my liability?
Right.
Where did they prove?
They'll point, won't they, to the they'll point to some legislation. I can't remember what it is.
Local Government Finance Act.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to do a separate presentation. I think we'll probably end up doing this in 3 parts. But this in here deals with the paperwork that for the people that are already being summoned.
Yes.
Right? Because it's already too late for them to do some of this, but they have a recourse, then they can ask for an extension. They can ask for a later date because nothing was proven on the council's part. So you now have a right to a defense to basically no claim.
Right.
And then it says the next thing on this same document. Right, this was a 4-page document. I just made it bigger so I could deal with it. It says attendance at the hearing is by telephone only. Well, I got news for you. All court cases are to be held in public. So now we got another violation, and we're going to use their own paperwork against them.
So they were asking that what the communication would be, or the court findings or what have you, is all by telephone, so that only one person can listen in on that. You're not expecting people to hover around a telephone and go all gather around so the public, any member of the public can witness what's going on around somebody's phone. I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's right. And any hearing, whether it's council tax or whatever, is supposed to be open to the public.
Yes.
So attendance by telephone only. Well, why is that? You don't even know who you're talking to. You could be talking to some guy in the Philippines. Who knows?
Yeah.
You don't know who they are.
No, quite. That's absolutely true.
And it says Lancaster City Council has summons you to court for unpaid council tax. What? How can Lancaster City Council... That's what this thing says. I'm reading it right off the document.
Right.
Lancaster City Council summons you to court for unpaid council tax. Lancaster City Council, or any council, can't summons me to do anything. That's an operation of the court.
Yes.
So there's a problem with that, right? The summons is included with this letter. Well, whatever, okay. And it says they're going to ask the court to grant a liability order for unpaid council tax. A liability order means that the court agrees that you owe the money. Well, what facts did they use to come up with this conclusion, right? and the council tax may take steps to do this. And it says these steps could include seizing goods. That's false. It says, or taking the money out of your wages, which is also illegal, or benefits, which is also illegal. The problem with this is, okay, the word include, we should do a thing on legal words, but the word include is restrictive. As we said once earlier, that if dinner includes chocolate cake for dessert, and they hand you a piece of chocolate cake, well, it was included. So if it includes one thing, it excludes everything else.
Yes.
Right? So
yes,
they're
most people think that it means you've got a series of things, and then it includes this other one. So you assume that it means all of the first and the other one, but actually it basically means just that last one, and everything else is not really the thing. So it's very deceitful.
Right. Yeah, and I learned that a number of years ago. And once you read the word includes, and you start to see what include is restrictive, it confines within. That's actually out of a law book. Now it says you have 5 options. Get a load of this crap. Okay, pay off the amount of the summons in full. This will end the case. Well, that's true. But you're not refusing to pay. Remember, you're asking for clarification.
Yes.
Okay. So did they determine the first thing the court should have done was determine your legal means to pay. Sometimes they do this up front, sometimes they do it after. And they ask the individual, the taxpayer, to fill out this paperwork as to who's your employer, how much do you make, what's your monthly expenses, blah, blah. Don't ever fill that piece of crap out, because that's a trail back to your employer. Yes. And they'll then go to your employer and say, we want to put a stop his or her wages.
Right.
You don't do that. Just don't fill that piece of junk out. Right? Just leave it blank. Yeah. Don't write refused on it. Don't put a stamp over it or some other crap. Just don't fill it out. Just no.
Just leave it.
Now, it says if you accept you owe the money, you can make an arrangement. Well, some people maybe, don't want to fight. So make an arrangement. But this thing should have been done. This arrangement should have been made prior to these monkeys trying to drag you into court. Right? You always try to settle your argument, which is called mediation, before you go to court, which is called litigation. Yeah. Mediate before litigate, right?
Right.
With the council, and you can usually do it through installments. And then if you miss a payment, well, then they can, cancel that agreement because you breached it, and away you go. Now it says, what are the things they come back with? Okay, if you do that, they still have the right to come back with the liability order if you breach the contract because you've made this agreement. Okay, and it says they won't take any steps to seize goods or whatever. Well, in reality, what they need to seize goods is called a writ. Okay, a writ order from the court. Okay, or a control. They also call it a controlled goods order. Some people, or some derivative thereof. There is no goods because you don't have anything that the municipality has leased you, rented you, or anything else. So if they go to seize your goods, they're yours, not theirs.
Yes.
The only time a court would be allowed to do that is if you had a lease against, or a loan for some sort of a good that you purchased, and then that person brought you to court and says, well, I had a lease contract with Richard, and he's not paying it, and after 90 days, okay, well, I want to collect on this.
Yeah. But your council isn't leasing you anything. It's not like they're leasing you the tree in front of your house. You can have use of the tree in front of your house, and you're paying for it or anything like that. But none of this so far has actually come from the court anyway.
No. And so I brought this one forward first because you now have some basis on if you go back to our primary legislation and you go back to this other, you have some grounds now to do your work, right? To start your argument. And for those people that they're already in the hot water, this is showing you where the flaws are.
Yes.
Right? Now, it says if you make the arrangements, you should contact Lancaster City Council immediately to talk about this rather than waiting for a hearing. You can speak to council by calling. It gives a phone number. Okay? If you disagree with the summons or believe that you should not be liable, you must contact the council immediately. Huh? We're already going to court. It's too late now. Okay? And then it says, please read the notice on the back of this letter. This really gets interesting. To tell what you may argue and what you can't, basically on the guidelines. Well, wait a minute. That's telling you right on this piece of paper that came with the summons that they're going to restrict your freaking defense.
Yeah.
How can they restrict your defense? Now that's depriving you due process of the law. We didn't even get into the rules yet. So that screws that up. And it says you can tell the counsel must prove the court and what the defenses you have. After reading these guidelines, if you still wish to discuss this, please contact the counsel no later than 12 noon the day before the court date. Well, that's also wrong, because in a court, any normal lawful court, you have to submit your paperwork prior to the trial, not the day before, right? Or the morning before, the noon hour before. So what kind of Mickey Mouse outfit is this? And if you look at the summons, there is no court file number. There's no file number on the summons. There's no file number on this letter.
Right.
So if there's no file number on these paperworks, then where's the lawful court case? Because every court case has a file number. So when you go to court and file it, they put it in the same file.
Yes.
Well, there is no file.
Do you even know what court it's going to?
Yeah, they tell you on the document.
They tell you the court, but you
on the summons.
Right.
They tell you on the summons, but they don't tell you squat on this letter. Now, in the case of Lancaster City Council, they turn around and they tell you to file your paperwork with Preston Court. What? Wait a minute.
Preston
so I got to contact Preston Court to deal with this matter, but yet I got to deal with Lancaster Court. What the hell? So
Yes.
You got two courts operating. So one of them is a baby court, one of them is the adult court. Who the heck knows? Now, it says if you're unable to agree with this counsel, they will arrange for you to join the court hearing by telephone. So now they're operating as a court, right? We've already seen this, right?
Yes.
Now it says join the court hearing and explain your case.
By telephone.
After reading the guidelines notes, you believe that you have a good defense and want to explain your case to the court, you may book a time to join the court hearing. No, that's bullshit. Because if you're being charged with something, you have a right to put in a defense.
Yes.
And why am I going back to Lancaster City Council to enter my defense? What the hell's going on?
But he said to join the court. I mean, surely join the hearing. You want to be at the hearing right from the start if you've got to go there. Not just join it halfway through. Oh, right, we'll ring up the defendant. What's your defendant? No, that's not accessible. Bye-bye.
Well, that's the stupidest thing, because when you do it this way, some monkey from somewhere calls you and says, I'm so-and-so from operating on behalf of the court.
And you don't know who they are.
You don't know who they are. They could be some guy in freaking Tahiti. So that's illegal. Court cases aren't supposed to be held in private anyways.
No.
Now, it says, or you can do nothing and the court will make the liability order in your absence.
Great.
Well, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, the way it's supposed to work with a standard court hearing normally, and we've discussed this before, but we'll go through it again. If I have a claim against Richard, for example,
yes,
I'm going to serve him the paperwork, say this is what I think you did wrong, and Richard has 28 or 30 days to answer it. Now, he can contact me, and he can start writing a letter and say, okay, I agree with you on this, and we can, go to the court for the other, or we can settle the whole thing. They didn't allow you that process.
Yes.
And remember, you didn't, if you follow what I told you, you didn't refuse to pay. All you're trying to do is get something clarified. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, to discuss the summons, you must contact the council and not the court. Well, we're already going to court based on the summons, so why am I talking to council? That should have been done a long time ago, prior to any of this going anywhere. Then it says, challenging the council liability order. I'm just reading from their own damn paperwork.
Yeah.
It says what the council must prove. This gets really stupid. It says to make a liability, the council must give evidence that there's a current entry for the property in the council tax banding list. Okay, which means your property is technically no longer private, but we're going to fix that later. And it is not a valid defense to a liability to say you do not agree with the council tax band. So what if they made a mistake, Richard? What if they put an extra 0 on your council tax bill?
Yeah.
Just a simple typing error.
Yeah.
Well, but you can't bring that up. What if they don't collect? What if they don't collect your bins properly?
Yeah.
What if they don't repair your street? Because, gee, there's a lot of potholes, and I notified them some 30 to 35 days, 40 days ago. They don't repair them. That's part of their job under the Highway Act. Okay? It says, but you can appeal to the ban, to the validation office, and it gives some website. Well, okay. So the court has no ability, if there's a screw up on the behalf of the council, either deliberate or not, they can't do nothing. Okay? Then it says the council has advertised the council tax in your local newspaper. Well, when's the last time you've seen a council tax notice in your local newspaper?
Well, I don't read the local newspaper, I'm afraid.
Yeah, right. It says the bill and reminder have been posted to the correct address. Well, that's malarkey, because what if you just moved in? You might be getting the last guy's tax notice.
Yeah.
What if they made a mistake or an error on the bill? Tough shit.
Yeah, and I'm a single occupancy, so they may have charged me for 2 people living here, or family, or whatever.
That's right. Okay, it's not a defense to say you didn't receive it. Well, what if you didn't receive it? What if you were in the hospital?
Yeah.
So that's another load of malarkey. The council just have to prove that they sent it to the right address.
And how do they do that?
They don't. Okay, you have not paid the council tax bill or any part thereof. Okay. If you've paid but not the cost, the council can still seek for liability order to use it to collect the cost. Well, what cost is there when they send over some file, probably electronically nowadays? And they try to usually bill people somewhere between £30 to £70, some cases higher. The actual legislation, I believe, is somewhere around £3, something like, or even maybe even less than that. I don't remember the exact thing. So how can they charge you 30 to 40, 60, 70 pounds? Okay. And then it says also here, defense to a liability order. There are only 2 reasons why council will not issue the liability order. So they're now telling you point blank that they're going to restrict your defense. Okay. The council has not done the things they're supposed to do. Okay. And what is that? Posted in the newspaper and they didn't mail it to you. Because they've already told you what it includes. Remember, includes is restrictive, right? The council has not done the things they're supposed to, and the bullet points above, and I gave you those. And it says you have not paid the full amount, including costs. So this is your only defense.
Which is pitiful, really.
It's pitiful. You don't have a defense. So why bother even dragging you to court?
Well, only to make money.
Only to make money, right. Things which are not defenses against a liability order. Magistrates cannot consider the following questions, right? Whether the council was right to order you to pay council tax on your house. Well, what if it's not your house? What if it's rental property?
Yeah.
That brings a question. Whether you should pay the tax. So you can't use that as a defense, whether you should pay the tax or not. Whether the amount claimed is wrong. So again, they're telling you in point blank letters, if there's a mistake on the council tax bill, tough.
You can't. The magistrate. They're telling you the magistrate cannot consider these. I mean, is it their job? I thought the magistrates' court was supposed to be open and honest and separate from whoever is bringing a case to it.
Supposed to be, yeah. Okay, whether you should get a council tax support, because there's certain people on tax support that don't get it. Maybe it gets messed up. Whether your council tax has been worked out correctly. So if the court can't address any of these points, right, and there's errors and mistakes, and maybe you're not liable because you only lived there for a week, too bad. Sorry, that's depriving me of due process of the law. So that invalidates their entire court hearing. Now, you can appeal against these questions to the building authority or tribunal, but you can't raise them in a court hearing. Well, if you send paperwork to the local council addressing these issues, which most of the time get ignored, and you can't address them in court, what have you got?
Yeah.
Anarchy is total crap, right? So that if you're in a situation where you've already received a summons, this is only the one from Lancaster City Council. Wherever you are, your letter will read something different, right? It's not a cookie cutter template, but they always say we have the right to do this under the Local Government Finance Act.
Yes.
That's one common denominator. And then there's the Local Government Finance Enforcement Act, or whatever the heck it's called. And so those two will be the next thing we deal with. And we'll also deal with the magistrate or the bailiffs.
Right. Yeah.
In our next presentation. So you guys can now see that just based on that summons alone, they're depriving you of any sort of a defense. They don't care if there's errors. They don't if it's worked out wrong, too bad. You have literally no defense. So this is not a valid court.
Yes. So, I mean, in essence, what you're saying is they've made up the rules. They're using threats of menaces. They're confusing you by telling you how and what will happen. And most people are completely ignorant and would go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I'll just acquiesce. They're sort of feeling as if they are pushed down this one avenue, which is absolutely built against them. As you've said, if there's mistakes, genuine mistakes, I mean, somebody may have put a wrong nought in the wrong place and you can't bring it up. So instead of £1,000 a year, you've got to pay £100,000 a year or whatever it is. It's like, no, that's no defence. It's like, bloody hell. And yet all of that is completely and utterly wrong, and you should be free to use their system or the legal system according to the overall rules and bring a defence against your whatever reason it is you're bringing in a fair and honest way. And they are misinforming you of what that fair and honest way is, and convincing you that you are stuck in this one little narrow band instead of having a proper trial where you can go to a magistrate's court and just say, look, these are my reasons and I think it's wrong, and the magistrate in theory should sit there and listen and then come up with a judgment based on that. But they're not even giving you that opportunity.
Right. And the thing is, when they mislead you like that, that's contempt of court.
Right.
And it's contempt of court by an officer of the court, because usually these hearings, although it's illegal, usually these hearings are run by a legal advisor. And usually it's the legal advisor that runs the whole show. And they're also the ones that review your case file when it's submitted. So that's not a justice of the peace. A legal advisor is just somebody there to give a legal argument either in your favor or against you.
So you're kind of almost judged. You're judged almost then before you've even arrived. You know, the magistrate is just there as a sort of somebody dressed up in a costume.
Well, presumably, maybe they're in the nude. We don't know. We didn't go there, right? We don't know who they are. And when you ask them, are they operating under oath? They'll disregard that. They just walk over it. You ask them their name. Well, you can put a submission in writing, and we'll tell you, maybe, right? So you can see from the conduct of what I've outlined, and this is fact. I mean, I know people have gone through this, so I can see where it's all going downhill. The one thing that I don't do, and a lot of viewers, maybe don't know this, unless I've walked the walk and done the actual work, I don't give out information. Or if I do, I say, I was told this, you guys can check it out. A lot of people run and they give, say, well, council tax is illegal. Okay, based on what? Whereas what I'm showing you, what Richard shows you, and this is one of the things I like about it, Richard, he digs into it when I tell him, go look here. I send him down the same rabbit hole so that everybody can see where the statute or the law came from, right? And they can see the whole thing where it is.
Yes.
And the thing is, we didn't create the YouTube. We didn't create Google. We didn't create the UK government website. So this is how I dig up the law. What I generally do, with this stuff, is I go download, as I've often said, download the actual statutes, print it out, stick it in a binder somewhere. Then if your thumb drive or your hard drive or whatever you stored it on craps out, at least you've got the paper copy. And if they change it, some people say, well, that was an old law. They changed it yesterday. I don't care. The thing is, you have a right to go back to the statute, which was relevant at the time. So if you get entangled in some legal mess, whatever it may be, and let's just say council tax, 2023. By the time you get to the end of it and it goes to trial 2024 and they change something, well, too bad. You're operating on the 23 issue, just like the legal and non-conforming with the cars we were talking about in a previous presentation. If the car didn't have a seatbelt, well, maybe now it's supposed to have a seatbelt, but back then it was legal and now it's legal and non-conforming. And the same thing goes through with the U-list. Your car met the emission standards at the time, you have a right to use that.
Yes.
The same with this. If they change the rules, you have a right to say, well, this was the rule current at the time when they started this, so that's the rules we're following. And I have seen them do that.
Yeah, because they're likely to change the rules in their favour rather than your favour.
Exactly.
Especially if they realise there's a loophole. Oh, there's a loophole. We'll change the rule. So if you've printed off the one that has the loophole or the legislation that proves your case, that's what you're going by. Because as you just so rightly said, that was current at the time.
Right. And if they make a rule like in Canada, the Income Tax Act prior to 1984 or 85, I have to look it up. It was voluntary. They didn't tell the people that. So all these people that have been paying income tax from 1984 prior, you're owed a refund.
Yeah, because you didn't know. Yeah,
you didn't know, and they hoodwinked you into doing this, which is again contempt of court. And if they make a law like in Ontario, they had the Highway Traffic Act 1928. It was to regulate commerce on the highway, but now they twisted it and say everybody needs a driver's license. Well, technically, driver's employed, and what benefit do you get from the municipality? Now, I agree that they want to ensure that people are safe on the road. They want to make sure you're competent when you operate your vehicle. But who do they take responsibility? I know a lady that was in downtown Toronto. She had her driver's license, and 17 hours later, she totaled her car. It was in a 3-car pileup. Well, whose fault was that? I don't know. Does the Ministry of Transportation take responsibility for that? They issued the driver's license. It was her fault.
Yeah. No.
Right?
Yeah. It's a good question.
So, but anyway, we've gone through the arguments, and I suggest everybody look at the primary legislation video we done earlier. This one gives you the arguments. What's wrong with the summons? If
And
you're already at that stage.
Yeah, it would be interesting if people who have had a summons, if you've got a summons from different areas, it would be interesting to see if you're looking at it and reading through it, what's similar to what Stan has just read out with the ones in Lancaster, and if there's variants, and if you've got a question, of course, send it over to Stan. But it would be interesting if there are some very strange anomalies in yours that we haven't covered, they're exposing more shenanigans.
Right.
So you can put them in the comments, and hopefully other people can sort of look at them and see it as well, which would be interesting. And if your comments disappear, let me just tell everybody whilst I talk about comments, I don't delete them. I mean, I don't know why they disappear. Some do disappear. If you put a link to something, it goes in for a review, and I'm always bloody knocking them back so that they should go through. But people keep telling me, put a comment in and it's gone. I don't know where it's gone. I haven't got the time to go through and delete them. I really haven't. So it's not me.
Right. The other thing you'll find too, when you go to these, if you go to one of these hearings, the legal advisor, as I say, administers it, and they tell you, well, they can commit you to prison. Okay, and that's where a lot of people get scared. And that's also where I notified the chancellor, because he's in charge of the court. There's the document. And I notified them that all these people that are illegally locked up for council tax. See, council tax is a civil claim. And there's 2 classes of claims. But basically there's 2 classes. There's a civil claim, which is a contract. Civil deals with contracts. And then there's a criminal claim. Well, a criminal claim is murder, rape, breaking and entering, stuff like this. The only time they're allowed to do a committal to prison is if it's a criminal offense. So because you didn't get a proper court hearing, and this is a civil claim in a civil matter, they have no legal right to do a committal to prison.
So people may well be in prison completely illegally.
100%. And we can go through that in the next presentation. The other thing that they'll do is they'll come to your house with bailiffs, or they'll send you letters, and they got to send you 2 or 3. And one thing I'm going to tell you right now is go look up if the bailiff is certified. You can do that. Just do Google search. And there's a list. You just type in the name of the bailiff or the name of the company. And in our case, when I dealt with the one, it was Duke's Bailiffs. They were the company that was hired by Lancaster City Council. And in fact, their bailiffs are not certified, or at least they weren't. And then later on, they were certified, but at a date in the future that hadn't even happened yet. So that tells you right there the courts that certify them, because they get certified through a court. It tells you the courts are actually operating in fraud to perpetrate the fraud.
Yeah.
So we got a problem. And then if you try to appeal this, because you didn't get a fair hearing, obviously, based on the paperwork I just gave you, the same legal advisor reviews it and says no, generally speaking. So you don't have the right to appeal through that appeals process. So the next step for you is you have to go to the High Court, and it's in the Administrative Court. Now, I've caught the Manchester Administrative Court accepting documents on an appeal well past the 30-day limit and notified them of, and I'm waiting for an answer, but they did that, and I said, what you just did was illegal because they have 30 days to do it. So what generally happens, to back up a little bit, if you have a court hearing and you don't agree with it, you file it in some form of an appeals court, generally you submit your documents into the, see, this is where the courts screw up. You submit your documents into a court, whether it's an appeals court or a standard court, doesn't matter. So let's just start with the basics of a normal court hearing, and I'll show you where this is wrong and where the appeal is wrong. So in any normal case, as I said earlier, I have a document. I'm going to sue Richard for whatever reason, don't know why. And I send the documents to him, and I start a claim. The first thing I do is I start a claim. Yep. He must be looking at a council tax bill.
Yeah.
So what I normally do is I go to the court and I ask for, I basically want to open a case. And what they'll do is they'll assign a case number. Okay, whatever the case number is, they give it to you. And you put that on all the documents that you have, that you submit, and then the respondent, if you will, or the defendant, does the same. Okay, that's
01.
Yeah, and it's usually in the upper corner.
Sorry.
Left-hand side, right-hand side, whatever. So you put that on there, and you have to follow the court form. Okay, you have to do it on their form. You can't go make up your own. Now, I've taken their court forms and modified them slightly, but they basically got to follow a general procedure, and we can go through that. And this is where one of your viewers have actually asked me, well, how do we draft the court forms? So we have another presentation down the line. But that's fine. I don't mind, because we've got to get these people to do it right.
Yeah.
So I submit the paperwork. I get a court file number. I submit my arguments to Richard. Here's my problems. Here's what you did wrong. Yep. So he can then come back to me and say, okay, I want to settle this privately, which is fine. Or he can say, no, I'm right and stands wrong. It reminds me of Mr. Bean. But anyway, so now we get this thing, and if he doesn't give me a defense or some sort of a response in 28 days or say 30 days, okay, I then have the right to go back to the court and say, okay, I haven't received a response. You know, here it is, and I want you to set a court date. Now, what I do slightly differently, because I like to speed things up, I don't like this crap hanging over people's heads. I will submit my claim, and I will submit my affidavit along with it to Richard. Now, you might just submit your claim, okay, and the claim outlines the problems. And what I have to do in a normal court case, I've opened the action, I got a case file number, I submitted my documents to Richard, okay? What I have to do is I have to give what's called either an affidavit of service for Canadian people or a certificate of service, which is the same thing. It's basically testifying that I gave this document to Richard and the clock is ticking. He's got whatever, 28 days to answer this thing. Now, what some people do, this is what I don't do, what some people do is then they'll go right up the affidavit. Okay, so you've now warned Richard something's coming, and he can go to a lawyer. The lawyer will request the documentation for clarification, whatever, and then I got to go deal with the lawyer. So this delays things for who knows how long, and I don't know if he's going to go to a lawyer or he's going to try and do it himself. So I'm waiting. And so because I haven't filed an affidavit of truth, and an affidavit, for those that don't know, is you're attesting to everything you state in that affidavit has to be true, has to be accurate, has to be based on first-hand knowledge. So it's not something that somebody told you, right? It has to be something that you know. So, Richard, can you give me your date of birth?
Yes. I'm not going
Okay,
to give it. I'm not going to give it. It's
He
the.
just committed perjury because he doesn't have first-hand knowledge of his date of birth. So this is how they trick you in the court of law. They ask you to state your date of birth. I don't know when my date of birth was. I can only give you hearsay evidence, which is inadmissible. So
Very good,
if
yeah.
I was to do this, right, if I was to write an affidavit, and if you know, I would write all the facts in there, but don't ever give out something like your date of birth because you don't really technically know, right? So you write your affidavit based on facts that you know, not hearsay evidence, and you have first-hand knowledge.
Sometime in the
Or, yeah,
20th century, it was. It's about all I know because I'm only 21.
okay, cool. There you go. So when you write up this affidavit, what I do is I submit that with my statement, with my claim. So now I'm not waiting for him to go get a lawyer to give all this paperwork, to get paperwork requests from the lawyer. You know, here's my information. No, I submit my claim and I submit my affidavit supporting my claim. In your affidavit, you can put exhibits out of the law. You normally don't, but I do because I like to make things smaller. Less paperwork for me, less paperwork for the judge. So I can submit my claim. I can submit photographs. I can submit documents. I can submit newspaper clippings. I can submit business reports, legal arguments to things, documents, you know, law, if I have to quote some section of the law. What you don't do normally is you normally don't print out the entire law. Like, let's just use, for example, the Criminal Code of Canada. If I need 1 point out of the Criminal Code of Canada, or even 50 points out of the Criminal Code of Canada, am I going to print out over 2,000 pages and say, here's my exhibit? No. So we're going to do a separate presentation on affidavits, and I'll show you how to do it properly. So anyway, now I've served my claim. I've got my file number. I served it to Richard. I serve in my affidavit along with it, because why not? And then I serve in a certificate of service or an affidavit of service and say, this is my information. He's now got 30 days or 28 days to answer it. Now, in Canada, in Ontario at least, you got 20 days. But if you need extra time, you put in a notice of intent to defend. Well, when I write an affidavit, I've got enough ammunition in there that probably took me a month to write it up. And it's all based on law. As I've shown you guys, I've had Richard pull it up. There is no disputing my claim. Because if you dispute my claim, you're going to tell me that your, I don't know, Local Government Finance Act or your Highway Act or Highway Traffic Act or Income Tax Act or whatever law I'm going to reference is not valid. Well, how can you do that? Because now you're going against the government.
Yeah.
So there is no defense for when I do a case. So if he can't defend it, okay, say he doesn't answer me. Just hypothetically, he doesn't answer it. He's out of heck with McDonald, and he leaves it. Bad idea. The next thing that happens is I go to the court, and I say, okay, I didn't receive a response, so I file a motion for summary judgment. But that motion for summary judgment has to be based on something that Richard was able to prove. You can't just put some arbitrary argument in there. You know, I've seen Santa Claus and Santa Claus is real, right? Or something I can't see.
Yeah.
So he has to base his claim. Now, if I get a claim from Richard that I what the heck, this is all malarkey, there's no proof to anything, then I can file a motion into the court to dismiss the case. Well, geez, how about we go back now to our procedures, right? So now let's say we've done this and whatever. Let's say there is a defense. Richard gave me a defense to the claim, and we don't agree. So the next thing that Richard's going to do, because I'm the guy that started it, I claimed it against him, I'm going to go to the court and I'm going to say, okay, set me down a trial date. The pleading portion, which is the part where we interchange paperwork, that's done. Okay? And that can take a while. I mean, it can be 30 days, and maybe he sends me something on the 27th day. I respond. We go back and forth. Eventually, we reach an end where we can't. Okay, there's 3 or 4 points that we can't get rid of. We need Mommy the judge to help us out. So then we set it down for a trial date. But we try and settle our difference ahead of time. This is the mediation part. If we have 15 points and we can settle them all but 3. The judge only deals with the 3. So then I turn around and I ask the court to assign a trial date. If then I should get my trial date. Now, in the case of Lancaster City Council, we tried to file an appeal. The same legal magistrate looked it over that ran the case and said no. So we had to appeal it to the administrative court, okay, which is technically a high court, administrative court in Manchester. Well, the Manchester court, after 30 days, you put in paperwork and you request a trial date, just like I told you. They turned around and came back and said, we're accepting defense paperwork now from the defendant. That was back in March. The court just broke the law. So the court doesn't have any jurisdiction. See? Now, if we go back to our council tax case, all that legal procedure I told you about, where did they follow it? They didn't bother to do any of it. They just sent a tax notice. Here's what you owe. No proof that you owe it. No proof that it was calculated or how it was calculated. No answer to your questions. No nothing. And the court has to be satisfied that the amount is owed. Well, just because they claim it's owed doesn't mean it's owed. Where's their proof? And since this is a civil case in a magistrate's court, where's their contract? Where's their agreement? And all you did was you questioned their building authority based on the fact that, I don't know, they don't fix the potholes. Based on the fact that you found out when you did some research, right, that they're engaged in bed and breakfast. They got 38 bills for that. Or they're engaged in investments in small arms or something else. Okay, I'm not saying any one particular thing. I'm just giving examples.
Yes.
So they didn't do that. So now what we'll do is in our next presentation, we'll deal with more of the legislation. But this shows you now that the standard court procedures they didn't follow it.
Yeah.
And they cannot turn around and take you into court and say that we're going to seize your assets or we're going to do a committal to prison, because they have no right to do that. And we're going to go over that in the next presentation. The other thing that they can't do is they can't enter your property and take your property. What they will try to do is tell you that they have the right to do it, maybe. Or in the case of Duke's Bailiffs, they admitted in writing, we have no reason to access your property. Yet they sent people to the property. What they're attempting to do then is they're going to try and put a clamp on your car. And if you want your car unclamped so you can drive your car, then you must pay the bill. Well, the problem is that your car may be needed in an emergency. Right? If you get injured and you got this piece of junk clamped to your car, you're not supposed to destroy it. Right? But if you have to get to the hospital, or you're a medical worker or a police officer, or you got an injured child because your kid fell down at school or whatever, you don't want to be dealing with this piece of garbage that's clamped to your car. So even that's illegal, because they're affecting your mobility, right? And it may be a matter of life and death, right? You don't know. But if you leave your car where they can find it, well, then they're going to probably clamp it or tow it or impound it or whatever. But they do not have the right to access inside your property, especially if you have a minor child. So don't let them in. Lock your doors. If you have to do everything by writing, because if you don't do it by writing, then, well, they said this, no, they didn't, and you get this he said, she said crap. Yeah. So do all your correspondence by writing.
We'll get into all of that, as you say, in the next presentation. I'm just aware that we're about an hour and 7 minutes in on this one.
Yep, that's right.
It can be quite confusing with all these different procedures, and if you're new to all of this, it can seem like, oh my God, how do I get my head round this? One of the things would be useful, I suppose, is a step-by-step guide of the procedures that should happen, and then a step-by-step guide, like on a PDF of what you do if not. Obviously, we're addressing as much as it in this form, but I know if you're having to go back to look to a video and go, oh, hang on, what did he say at about 17 minutes and 32 seconds in? But as a grounding, it just goes to show, I think, that the system is rigged against us. The courts and the councils do not seem to be working on behalf of the people, and certainly with the council taxes, all the different elements that you've described just prove that, or certainly a question that they're not operating correctly as they should. And as I said before, it'd be interesting if anybody's got one of these summons, what the weird and warped procedures they're saying and how they're limiting your ability to defend yourself. But we will
Exactly.
we'll go into that on the next presentation. Stan, it's been a journey, and there is more to come. It just goes to show how much we have been interfered with, really, on in the legal system, and how much nobody is really playing the game fairly.
Exactly. And the reason I brought this one out first is some people are in this position where they've already getting the summonses or whatever. And I'm not advocating that you do this procedure. I'm just telling you the repercussions and what could happen. And you should also note that there is no prescribed form for issuing these council tax orders. So if there's no prescribed form for issuing them, there used to be, but there isn't now. So what happened? They used to be called poll tax, and then that got into some legal hot water, and then they've invented this council tax, but it's one and the same.
Yeah,
and we only went through the paperwork that comes and one act of the law, and look where we are. We've already found some flaws.
Yeah.
In our next video, we'll expand on that, and we'll deal with some other statutes, and just briefly touch on this, and hopefully everybody can proceed whichever way they see fit. As you said, I don't think anybody wants to outright refuse to pay a contribution if, in fact, the council is doing what it was supposed to do.
Yes, that's
but
right.
It was admitted by the people, by the council tax people, that it doesn't pay for any specific product or service. They admitted that.
All right.
So if it doesn't pay for any specific product or service, then why am I throwing money at it?
Exactly. I mean, at least at McDonald's you do get a burger.
Well, you might think it's a burger. It might not be.
Well, I don't want McDonald's coming down on me a ton of bricks. I mean, you get something that looks and smells like a burger, so I'll leave the rest up to the viewer. Anyway, thank you, Stan. Really appreciate that. I hope that's been of help. The email address and other bits and bobs will be in the description, so you can go and check out all of that. And we will be back with another one and part 2 of this very, very soon. Watch this space. Thank you so much, Stan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
Till next time, from me and Stan, goodbye.